The morning I found a backhoe ripping through my grandfather's pecan grove, trees he planted the year I was born, I knew the Ridgecrest HOA had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. 6 a.m. diesel fumes mixing with torn earth, the hydraulic screech of machinery murdering 40-year-old wood, a foreman in a hard hat waving a permit signed by Veronica Ashworth, HOA president, real estate agent, and the kind of woman who calls a $900,000 ranch an eyesore. They were installing a drainage pipeline. 48 inches of corrugated steel straight across my land, dumping their golf course runoff into the creek where my cattle drink. My compensation, $8,000, non-negotiable. Veronica thought I was just another old rancher she could steamroll. She had no idea I'd been playing a longer game than she could imagine. Here's my question for you. What would you do if someone built on your property without asking? And where are you watching this from? Drop your location below. I need to know I'm not alone in this fight. My name is Cole Brennan, 54, third-generation rancher, and if you ask my wife Shauna, too stubborn to quit anything. These 80 acres? My grandfather Emmett bought them in 1957 with his Korea discharge pay. $9,000 cash for what everyone called worthless scrubland. He spent 30 years turning dirt into legacy, digging wells, planting pecans, stringing fence in heat that'd kill a horse. On my 25th birthday, he handed me the deed and said, "Don't let anyone take this from you. I run 40 head of Angus. Keep bees. The land's paid for. Shauna teaches 4th grade. Our daughter Mariah just finished vet school. First Brennan with a doctorate. We're not rich, but we're not desperate. Remember that. Here's what nobody knows. 15 years ago, during the worst drought this county had seen, I bought a failing water utility called Clearwater Solutions, paid $340,000, registered it under Emmett Holdings, LLC, hired a manager to run it. I'm a ghost owner. No public records. No press. Why? Because in Texas, water isn't a commodity, it's power. And Clearwater now services 14 towns, including Ridgecrest. But let's rewind. 5 years ago, a developer built Ridgecrest Estates. 350 homes, golf course, spa, the kind of place where retirees play weekend cowboy. Houses sold before foundations were poured, the HOA formed instantly. Veronica Ashworth, real estate agent, early investor, professional queen bee, crowned herself president. Veronica wears $1,000 boots and drives a Range Rover with plates reading "Sold It." She uses words like optics and calls my ranch rustic the way you'd say condemned. Within 6 months, she lobbied the county to rezone land around Ridgecrest. Her target? My 80 acres. She wanted Phase 2 expansion, luxury homes, boutique hotel, winery, 3 offers. First, $600,000. More than fair for land this quaint. I said no. Second, $750,000. She brought blueprints. Think of your legacy, Cole. Your grandfather would want you to be practical. I said no. Third, $500,000. Take it or leave it. Property values are dropping. I said no. That's when the gloves came off. 6 months ago, Ridgecrest commissioned a drainage study. Their engineer, paid by Veronica, declared my creek the only viable outlet for their stormwater runoff. The county granted them a permit under public necessity. They'd install a 48-inch pipe across 600 feet of my land. Compensation, $8,000. I called Buck Hollister, county commissioner, old friend. He pulled me aside at the courthouse, voice low. "Cole, Veronica's got the new county attorney wrapped. He rubber-stamped this without reading it. Legally, it's garbage, but fighting means lawyers you can't afford. 2-year fight, minimum." His office smelled like burnt coffee and regret. His handshake was damp. I did the math. Lawyer retainer, 15 grand. Court costs could hit 50,000. I took the 8,000, signed the easement, but I photographed everything. Permits, survey stakes, emails, GPS coordinates, timestamps. Because Grandpa Emmett taught me pick your battles, but when you pick one, end it. At the signing, Veronica handed me the check, lips curling. "I'm sure you'll spend this more wisely than you maintain that barn, though I suppose people like you are just built differently." She let the pause linger, just long enough to make it sting. I folded the check, smiled. "Appreciate your concern, Veronica." That night, I watched their crew work under floodlights. Machinery chewing through soil. The beep, beep, beep of reversing trucks. The acrid smell of diesel mixing with torn mesquite roots. Shauna brought me a beer. "It's just drainage, honey. Not worth a heart attack." I nodded, but my jaw was tight. Because I wasn't angry. I was planning. And Veronica had just given me every reason I needed. A week after the pipeline went live, my cattle stopped drinking from the creek. Not slowly, not gradually. They just refused. 40 head of Angus standing 10 feet from water they'd used their entire lives, bellowing like something was wrong. If you've never raised cattle, let me tell you, when they won't drink, you've got maybe 48 hours before you're looking at serious problems. Dehydration, kidney stress, weight loss. I grabbed a sample jar and drove to the county extension office. The water tech ran the tests while I waited. Took 20 minutes. When he came back, his face told me everything. Your pH spiked to 8.4. Should be neutral, around 7, silt content is 4 times normal, and you've got traces of diesel, concrete leachate, and something that looks like fertilizer runoff. He pushed the printout across the desk. This water's been contaminated recently. You have construction upstream? I had construction all right. 600 feet of brand new HOA drainage pipe dumping straight into my creek. I called the Ridgecrest office. The secretary, some teenager who sounded like she was filing her nails, said, "Not our problem. Your cattle, your issue." Click. So much for customer service. I half expected her to charge me for the phone call. I drove to the Ridgecrest clubhouse. Marble floors, crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my truck. Air conditioning set so cold I could see my breath. The lobby smelled like synthetic lemon cleaner and fresh paint, that chemical sweetness that makes your teeth ache. Elevator music looped the same 8-bar piano riff. I sat on a leather couch that was more art than furniture and waited and waited. Veronica kept me there 40 minutes. I watched 3 residents walk past, giving me looks like I'd tracked manure on their precious carpet. My boots were clean, by the way. I'd checked. Finally, her assistant appeared. "Miss Ashworth can see you now." Veronica sat behind a glass desk in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course. She didn't stand, didn't offer her hand, just checked her watch like I was already stealing her time. I laid out the water test results, explained the contamination, asked politely for remediation, a settling pond, basic filtration, anything. She barely glanced at the paperwork. "Our engineer certified that pipeline as environmentally neutral. If your creek is dirty, maybe your cattle are the problem. Have you considered your herd might be overgrazing, stirring up sediment?" I kept my voice level. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to do the right thing. Your runoff is poisoning my water." She smiled, the kind of smile that makes you want to check if your wallet's still in your pocket. "Mr. Brennan, Ridgecrest represents $140 million in property value. Your ranch generous estimate might be worth $800,000. The county agrees our needs outweigh yours." She stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. "If you don't like it, sue us." She glanced over her shoulder. "Oh, wait, you can't afford to." I left without another word, drove home, sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of aspirin and every document related to that pipeline. Grandpa Emmett's voice echoed in my head. "Pick your battles, but when you pick one, end it." I pulled out my phone, texted Darnell, my Clearwater manager. "Pull the Ridgecrest file. I need to read every word of their contract." He replied in 30 seconds. "Trouble?" I typed back. "Opportunity." The contract arrived in my email an hour later. 20-year water supply agreement, standard rates, but buried in page 17, clause 7B, rate adjustment provision. If a customer violates environmental covenants or causes contamination upstream of utility sources, the provider can escalate rates up to 300%. Right below it, clause 9C, breach remediation. The utility can mandate corrective action at customer expense. Translation: if they're poisoning the watershed, I can make them pay to fix it, or cut their water entirely. Here's your first knowledge nugget, folks. When you sign a utility contract, read every clause, especially the boring ones about environmental compliance. Those paragraphs aren't just legal mumbo-jumbo. They're leverage. The takeaway: contracts aren't just rules, they're weapons. You just have to know where to aim. I didn't tell Veronica. Not yet. Instead, I bought 4 trail cameras and installed them along the pipeline route. Camouflaged them in mesquite brush, positioned to cover the access hatches. I wanted proof. For 3 days, I checked that footage obsessively, drinking too much coffee and not enough sleep. On day 4, I hit gold. Ridgecrest lawn crews and HOA-branded trucks, opening pipeline access hatches and dumping grass clippings, pool backwash, and landscape fertilizer straight into the pipe. Not stormwater, waste. Illegal waste. See, dumping organic matter and chemicals into a drainage system that feeds a watershed? That violates the Clean Water Act, federal law. The kind of violation that brings EPA fines starting at $10,000 per day. I had timestamps, faces, license plates. I downloaded everything, backed it up in 3 places, and started a new folder, evidence. That night, Shauna found me at the kitchen table. Photos spread like a crime scene investigation. Cold coffee. She asked what I was doing. I said due diligence. She knows that tone. I'm not stewing, I'm plotting. 2 weeks later, every mailbox in Ridgecrest received a glossy newsletter. Full color, professional layout, the kind of publication that costs real money to print. Front page headline, 48-point font, local landowners neglect threatens community water quality. Byline, Veronica Ashworth, HOA president. I found my copy wedged in the screen door. The paper was thick, expensive stock. The smell of fresh ink made my stomach turn. The article was a masterpiece of careful lies. Claimed my rundown ranch was leaching manure into the shared watershed, cited anonymous complaints about overwhelming odors and rodent infestations, suggested my cattle operation endangered Ridgecrest's children. Center page, a photo of my barn, unflattering angle, peeling paint highlighted, taken from the public road with a telephoto lens. Caption, unmaintained structures raise questions about owners' commitment to community standards. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. Not from fear, from the kind of cold anger that makes you see clearly. My daughter called an hour later, voice breaking. Dad, someone left this on my apartment door. There's a handwritten note that says, your dad is poisoning our kids. Mariah's 26, just graduated vet school. She's got enough stress without becoming collateral damage in Veronica's war. I told her to ignore it, told her I'd handle it, but my jaw was clenched so tight I thought I'd crack a molar. Then Shauna came home from school, pale as I'd ever seen her. My principal got an email, CC'd to the entire school board. Someone's questioning whether a teacher married to a documented polluter should be influencing young minds. She dropped her bag on the counter. Cole, they're coming after my job. The hate mail started the next day. 2 anonymous letters. One calling me white trash poisoning good people's water. The other threatening a class action lawsuit. The paper gave me paper cuts. The envelopes tasted like spite and discount glue. I stopped going to the feed store during peak hours, too many dirty looks. One guy I'd known for 15 years crossed the street to avoid me. Small-town rumors spread faster than a summer brush fire. So I hired an independent environmental consultant named Derek, $1,200. Derek was mid-30s, PhD in hydrology, and the kind of guy who wore Birkenstocks to industrial sites and didn't care what anyone thought. He spent 2 days testing my land, the creek above the pipeline, below the pipeline, and Ridgecrest's runoff directly. His report came back in 10 days, 30 pages of science. Executive summary on page 2. Brennan property is in full environmental compliance. Contamination originates from Ridgecrest HOA drainage system. Violations include unpermitted discharge of chemical fertilizers, pool chlorination byproducts, and hydrocarbon residue. This constitutes a Clean Water Act violation under Section 402. I made 6 copies, sent them certified mail to Veronica, County Environmental Office, State EPA, and Buck. Attached an invoice, $1,200 for the study, $8,000 for the original easement payment, $4,500 in vet bills for cattle stress and dehydration. Total, $13,700. Due in 30 days. I imagined Veronica opening that envelope. The thought made me smile. Her response? Silence. Not a call, not an email. Instead, 10 days later, a county zoning inspector showed up. Kid couldn't have been 25. Kept apologizing. Sir, I have to follow up on a complaint that your cattle head count exceeds permitted limits. I showed him my records. Bills of sale, vet certificates, grazing permits, everything organized in 3-ring binders because I'm not an idiot. He checked his clipboard, checked my numbers, looked like he wanted to disappear. Mr. Brennan, this seems retaliatory, but I have to log it anyway. Procedure, I nodded. Didn't make it easy for him. Tell your boss I said hello. That night, I pulled up Clearwater's customer database. Ridgecrest's water usage history for 5 years. And there it was. Beautiful as a sunrise. The HOA was using 18% more water than their contracted allocation. Every month. For 2 years. Here's how that math works. They're contracted for 500,000 gallons monthly. 18% over means they're using 90,000 extra gallons each month. At $9 per 1,000 gallons, that's $810 monthly in overage fees. Times 24 months equals $19,440. Add late fees, and we're at $23,000. Never invoiced because Darnell hadn't caught it. Honest oversight, expensive one though. For them. I called Darnell. Send the bill, certified mail, due in 15 days. He hesitated. Boss, this'll make waves. I said good, I hope they choke on them. Here's knowledge nugget number 2. Utility contracts have overage clauses that most people never read and most utilities never enforce. But when you need leverage, those forgotten fees become a sledgehammer. The takeaway, your enemy's sloppiness is your ammunition. Document everything, invoice everything, make them pay for every mistake. Shauna asked if I'd reveal I owned Clearwater. I smiled. Not yet. Let them panic first. Rufus barked at the mailman, delivering another wave of hate mail. I scratched his ears. Yeah, buddy, nobody likes bills. I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of a truck engine idling on my property. Not close to the house, maybe quarter-mile out near the pipeline easement. The bedroom was dark as a cave, air conditioning humming, and for a second I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard gravel crunching under tires. I grabbed my flashlight and shotgun. Didn't load it. The sound of a pump action racking a shell is usually enough to make people reconsider their choices. Shauna stirred. What's wrong? I said stay inside, and slipped out into air so thick and hot it felt like breathing through a wet towel. The truck was gone by the time I got there, but the damage wasn't. 50 feet of barbed wire fence cut clean. 3 posts knocked over. Wire snipped in 6 places with bolt cutters, the kind of precise cuts that said someone knew what they were doing. My cattle had wandered through the gap onto Ridgecrest's unfenced golf course, probably thinking they'd found bovine paradise. That grass gets watered twice a day. Can't say I blamed them. I was herding them back when headlights appeared. Ridgecrest security guard in a golf cart, radio already in hand. He'd called the sheriff before saying hello. The deputy arrived, wrote his report with the enthusiasm of a man filling out tax forms. Livestock at large, $500 fine, Mr. Brennan. I showed him the cut fence, the fresh tire tracks in mud, treads that didn't match anything I owned. He took photos, nodded slowly. File a counter-report for vandalism, but without witnesses. He trailed off. We both knew how this worked. I'd be paying that fine. I spent the next morning repairing fence in 90-degree heat. T-posts, wire, sweat-soaked shirt sticking to my back, thinking about Grandpa Emmett's line. A man who will cut your fence will cut your throat given the chance. Time to stop playing defense. I called Buck first. He met me at a diner off the highway, slid into the booth looking like he'd aged 5 years. Cole, Veronica's lobbying for eminent domain. She wants the county to seize your land for public safety, then lease it to the HOA for golf expansion. He stirred coffee he wasn't drinking. I voted against it twice, but she's not stopping. Next I called Darnell. Pull everything on Ridgecrest. Every permit, every connection, every tap, full audit. He delivered in 48 hours. 17 unpermitted fire hydrants. Now here's why that matters. Every hydrant is a direct connection to the municipal water system. Installing one without approval is like splicing into your neighbor's electrical panel. It's theft. It affects system pressure for everyone, and in Texas, it's a $2,500 fine per hydrant. Multiply that out, and Ridgecrest was looking at over $40,000 in penalties. Plus 2 unpermitted irrigation wells drilled straight into the aquifer that feeds Clearwater's system. That's not a fine. That's a felony. State water rights violation. Then I called Luz Fuentes, Shauna's college friend, environmental and water law attorney. I laid out everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she made a sound like a card shark spotting a drunk tourist. Cole, this is a Clean Water Act slam dunk plus contract fraud. I'll take it pro bono for the publicity alone. My only question is, how far are you willing to go? I didn't hesitate. As far as it takes to make sure they never do this to anyone else. Here's knowledge nugget number 3. There's a legal concept called anticipatory breach. You don't have to wait for someone to destroy you completely before you act. If their pattern of behavior shows they're going to violate a contract, you can terminate it now. Ridgecrest's contamination, unpaid overages, and illegal infrastructure proved they were bad faith actors. The takeaway? Don't wait for your enemy to finish the job. Strike when you see the pattern. Last, I called Tommy Vickers. Retired hydro engineer 72, designed Clearwater's original infrastructure. He walked my property, did measurements, scratched numbers on a notepad held together with duct tape. His verdict? That pipe's undersized by half. Think of it like a garden hose trying to drain a swimming pool. Next big rain, you'll have a flood that'll carve a canyon through your pasture. They saved maybe 50 grand on materials. It'll cost you 200 in damages. That weekend, me, Tommy, Buck, and 3 neighboring ranchers built a bypass system. 6 grand in PVC and gravel. Diverted clean spring water to troughs, isolated the cattle from contaminated creek. July heat that made your vision swim. Shirts soaked through by 9 a.m., the satisfying thunk of a post driver hitting caliche. Cold Shiner Bock from an ice chest at sunset. One rancher, old guy named Chet, wiped his forehead and said, "This is what HOAs don't understand. Out here we don't need bylaws, we've got each other." The plan crystallized. Luce files lawsuit. Darnell sends Clearwater's termination notice. I leak everything to Rita at the Gazette. 3 strikes. 1 week. That night on the porch, Shauna brought lemonade. "You're enjoying this," I grinned. "I'm winning it." The notice landed on Veronica's desk 3 days later. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Clearwater Solutions LLC official letterhead. I wasn't there to see her face, but Darnell gave me the play-by-play later. Apparently she opened it during a board meeting. 5 board members present. 3 of them rubber stamps who'd vote yes if Veronica said the sky was plaid. 2 skeptics, including Glenn Pritchard, retired civil engineer who'd been raising questions about HOA finances for months. The letter was 3 pages. Legal language, professional, cold. Page 1 detailed $23,000 in water overage fees due immediately. Page 2 listed 17 unpermitted fire hydrant connections at $2,500 per violation, totaling $42,500 in fines. Page 3 was the hammer. 2 unpermitted irrigation wells constituted breach of contract and criminal violation of state water rights law. Clearwater was obligated to report them to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. 30 days to cap the wells, pay all outstanding fees and penalties, or face immediate water service termination. Glenn spoke first, according to Darnell's source on the board. How did they suddenly notice all this? Veronica's face had gone the color of old newspaper. "This is harassment. That hillbilly rancher must have complained to them." Here's something most people don't know about water utilities. When you drill an unpermitted well into an aquifer that supplies a municipal system, you're not just stealing water. You're potentially contaminating the entire system. One bad well can poison thousands of people. That's why it's a felony in most states. Texas will levy $10,000 per day in fines once they're notified. And the utility has a legal duty to report it, not just for the money, but for public safety. The takeaway? Infrastructure violations aren't paperwork problems. They're criminal liability waiting to happen. Veronica called an emergency meeting with her lawyer, Bradley Finch. Slick guy, mid-40s, the kind of attorney who wears cufflinks that cost more than most people's car payments. Finch read the notice twice. Didn't say anything the first time through. The second time, he set it down carefully, like it might explode. "This is serious. If Clearwater terminates your water service, your property values crater overnight. No water means no certificates of occupancy for Phase 2. You can't sell homes that can't legally be inhabited." Veronica leaned forward. "Can we sue them?" Finch almost laughed. "For what? Enforcing their contract? You're in clear violation on multiple counts. We're not victims here. We're defendants waiting for the lawsuit." She tried another angle. "Find out who owns Clearwater. Maybe we can negotiate directly." Finch nodded, started making calls. By end of business, he'd hit a brick wall. "It's registered to Emmett Holdings LLC, private company. No public ownership records. I can't find the principals." Veronica's voice went tight. "Then we pay the fines and move on." Finch shook his head. "It's $65,000 just for the hydrants and overage. The wells are criminal charges. The state's involved now. This isn't a checkbook problem anymore." Back at the ranch, Darnell called to update me. "They're panicking. Finch has been calling every contact he has trying to find out who owns us." I smiled. "Told Darnell if they ask directly, give them the holding company name, Emmett Holdings LLC, nothing more." He chuckled. "You want them scared." I said, "I want them aware that actions have consequences." That night, the Ridgecrest neighborhood Facebook group lit up. Someone posted, "Is our water getting shut off?" 300 comments in an hour, rumors spreading like mesquite fire. One resident posted, "Maybe we shouldn't have pissed off the rancher." Veronica deleted the comment within 5 minutes. Banned the user. But you can't delete fear. It was already spreading, and I was just getting started. Luce filed the lawsuit on a Tuesday morning. Brennan versus Ridgecrest Homeowners Association, County Civil Court. The claims read like a greatest hits of property law violations. Trespass, nuisance, defamation, negligence, breach of easement terms, and my personal favorite, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We were seeking $150,000 in damages, an injunction to remove the pipeline, full restoration of my land by certified environmental contractors, and legal fees. Luce's strategy was simple and brutal. "We don't need to win fast, Cole. We need to hurt them. Discovery will expose every dirty email, every shady board vote, every lie Veronica told. If she discussed sabotaging your fence or smearing you in writing, that's evidence of malice. In Texas, malice triples damages. Here's knowledge nugget number 4, and this one's gold. In legal discovery, you can subpoena emails, text messages, and and board meeting minutes. Most people don't realize their casual texts and angry emails become evidence. Delete them? That's spoliation, which makes judges very angry. The takeaway? Your enemy's digital trail is your smoking gun. They can't help but document their own crimes. While Luce handled the legal assault, I met with Rita Sandoval at the Cibolo County Gazette. Rita's been editor for 20 years, seen this county transform from cattle ranches to golf courses, and she's not happy about it. Her office smelled like old coffee and printer ink. Stacks of newspapers dating back decades lined the walls like historical evidence. I laid out everything. Photos of cut fence, water test results, timeline of Veronica's offers and threats, copies of the threatening letters. She listened, took notes in shorthand that looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics, then leaned back in her chair. This is front page, Cole, but I need one thing. Proof the HOA knew they were contaminating your water and didn't care. Something undeniable. I pulled out my phone, showed her the trail camera footage. HOA landscaping supervisor, clear as day, directing his crew to dump grass clippings into a pipeline access hatch. Audio captured. Just dump it. Nobody checks this thing. Rita watched it twice. The second time, she was smiling. How soon can you send me this file? That afternoon, Tommy Vickers came by the ranch with his engineering report. 15 pages of technical analysis, flow calculations, structural assessments, all boiling down to one conclusion. The pipeline was a disaster waiting to happen, and when it failed, I'd have legal proof of negligence. But waiting for failure meant my cattle would suffer. Tommy proposed a solution. We'd already built the bypass for $6,000. For another $12,000, we could install monitoring equipment, flow sensors, water quality meters, real-time data logging. When that pipe fails, and it will, you'll have time-stamped evidence of exactly what went wrong and when. No he said, she said, just data. I wrote the check. Sometimes you spend money to make a point that's worth more than money. Next, Buck pulled county records on Veronica's personal finances. All public information, property tax records, court filings, nothing illegal about looking. What we found was beautiful. Veronica owned 4 investment properties in Ridgecrest, all mortgaged at 90% loan to value. She was leveraged to her eyeballs. If property values dropped, say, because of a water crisis, she'd be underwater on all 4 properties. Her entire net worth was tied to Ridgecrest, staying valuable. One resident posted online, "Our property values are going to tank if we lose water." He wasn't wrong, and Veronica knew it. Her empire was a house of cards built on maintaining the illusion that Ridgecrest was a desirable place to live. Here's knowledge nugget number 5. In Texas, HOA assessments are called super liens. If homeowners don't pay, the HOA can foreclose on their property, jumping ahead of even the mortgage company. But here's the catch. If the HOA itself becomes insolvent, it can't enforce collections. It's a beautiful paradox. The more Veronica needed money, the less power she had to get it. The takeaway? Financial leverage works both ways. Sometimes the best weapon is showing your enemy how close they are to collapse. The pieces were falling into place. Luce had the lawsuit filed. Discovery requests submitted. Rita had her story ready to publish. Darnell had Clearwater's termination notice drafted, waiting for day 31. Tommy's monitoring equipment was installed and logging data. And I had a folder 3 inches thick of evidence that would bury Veronica in any courtroom in the state. Late one night, Shauna found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and legal documents. The laptop glow made the room feel like a war room, which I suppose it was. She set down a cup of tea I hadn't asked for but needed. "You're going to give yourself a heart attack." I looked up. "I'm going to give her one." Shauna smiled, the kind of smile that reminded me why I married her. "Then make sure she sees it coming." I grinned. That was the plan exactly. Veronica thought she could bully a rancher. She forgot that ranchers are patient. We plant seeds and wait for harvest. And her harvest was about to come due. The Gazette hit doorsteps on Thursday morning. Front page, above the fold, HOA's pipeline problem, rancher fights back. Rita's article was surgical. She laid out the timeline. Veronica's 3 lowball offers, the rushed permit, the contaminated water, Derek's environmental report, and right there, center page, a screenshot from my trail camera footage showing an HOA employee dumping waste into the pipeline. Faces blurred for legal reasons, but the HOA logo on the truck was crystal clear. By noon, the newspaper's website had crashed from traffic. By evening, Rita called to tell me letters to the editor were running 20-1 in my favor. The Ridgecrest Facebook group turned into a war zone, homeowners demanding Veronica's resignation, others defending her, claiming I was an opportunist. One comment thread got so heated the moderator shut it down. But you can't shut down anger once it's lit. Veronica responded with a counterattack that showed how desperate she'd become. First, she placed a full-page ad in Texas Living magazine, one of those glossy publications that rich people leave on coffee tables to prove they're cultured. The article was titled, "The Truth About Rural Neglect," and painted me as a greedy opportunist exploiting technicalities to extort a community of hardworking families. It was a masterpiece of spin, almost made me sound like the villain. Must have cost her $15,000 for the placement. Money she didn't have based on Buck's financial research. 2 days later, she showed up at my ranch unannounced. Drove right up to the barn where I was fixing a tractor that had been giving me trouble since April. She stepped out of her Range Rover wearing heels that had no business on a ranch and carrying an envelope. "Cole, let's be reasonable." She handed me the envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $50,000 and a typed settlement agreement. I'd drop the lawsuit, admit publicly that my cattle caused the contamination, and sign a statement saying the HOA acted in good faith. In exchange, $50,000 and they'd leave me alone. I set the envelope on the tractor hood, looked at her. "Get off my land," she tried to smile. "You're making enemies you can't afford, Cole." I picked up the torque wrench I'd been using, not as a threat, just went back to work. "I'm making a point. Now leave before I call the sheriff for trespassing." She left, but the harassment didn't stop. Anonymous flyers started appearing on windshields around town. Cole Brennan, extortionist or victim, with half-truths and distorted facts designed to muddy the water. Someone spray-painted "liar" on my mailbox. Shauna started getting hang-up calls at school, and then my daughter Mariah called, voice shaking. "Dad, I got a text from a blocked number. It says if you don't drop the lawsuit, they'll file a complaint with the state veterinary board claiming I falsified my licensing credentials." "Dad, I didn't. I worked so hard for that license." I told her to screenshot everything and send it to me. Then I called Luz. She listened, silent as I forwarded the messages. When I finished, her voice was cold as January steel. "Cole, that's witness intimidation. Federal felony. Screenshot everything and file a police report immediately. This is the kind of mistake that ends careers." I drove to the sheriff's office. Detective Ramirez, competent guy about my age, took my statement, looked at the messages. "This is serious, Mr. Brennan. Threatening professional licenses to influence a lawsuit. We'll open an investigation. I'll need to interview your daughter." He did. Mariah confirmed the hang-up calls, the threatening text. Ramirez got a warrant for phone records, started tracing the number. Meanwhile, I went silent. No interviews, no social media, no public statements. Let them think they'd rattled me. But quietly, behind the scenes, I was tightening the noose. Darnell prepared Clearwater's final termination notice, ready to send the second we hit day 31. Luce filed a motion to expedite discovery, citing the intimidation attempts. The judge granted it. We'd have access to HOA emails and board minutes within 2 weeks instead of 2 months. Tommy documented 3 new leaks in the pipeline after a moderate rain, exactly as he'd predicted. Water pooling in my pasture, muddy and chemical smelling. And I pulled every public record I could find on Veronica personally. Property records, court filings, tax liens. Turned out she'd been sued twice for breach of contract in real estate deals, settled both times. Her business partner from 5 years ago had filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission alleging fraud. Dismissed for lack of evidence, but the complaint was public record, pattern of behavior. Luce loved it. Late one night, 2 a.m., I was still working. Shauna came downstairs, found me surrounded by paper. "You're obsessing." I looked up. "I'm finishing what she started." Shauna poured herself a glass of water from the tap, clean water from our bypass system, then finish it fast. "I want my husband back." Late August brought what the Weather Service called a tropical disturbance. What we called it was 9 inches of rain in 18 hours. The kind of storm that turns dry creek beds into rivers and tests every piece of infrastructure you've got. I spent the first 12 hours watching weather radar and checking the bypass system Tommy and I had built. It held. Our cattle had clean water. They were safe. But I knew that pipeline was about to prove Tommy's predictions right. It failed at 2 in the morning. I heard it from the house, a sound like thunder but wrong, too sustained, too liquid. By the time I got there with a flashlight, 3 sections of that undersized pipe had burst. Water was pouring through the breaks, not just rainwater, but everything Ridgecrest had been dumping into that system for months. The runoff was gray-brown, smelled like chemicals and sewage, and it was flooding 12 acres of my lower pasture. The hay crop I'd been growing was underwater, The fence line we'd repaired after the sabotage was washing out again. I stood there in the rain watching thousands of dollars in damage accumulate by the minute, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Because now I had undeniable proof. I called Tommy, 3 a.m., didn't care. It failed, exactly like you said. He was at my ranch by sunrise with his drone. We documented everything. Aerial footage of the flood, close-ups of the burst pipe sections, water samples showing contamination levels that would make an EPA inspector weep. Tommy's equipment had logged the whole event. Timestamps, flow rates, pressure spikes, data that couldn't be argued with or spun. The damage assessment came in at $38,000. 12 acres of hay ruined, that's $8,000. Fence repairs, $3,000. Soil contamination requiring professional remediation, $15,000 estimated. Loss of pasture use for the next growing season, another $12,000. I documented every penny. But Ridgecrest was hurting worse. The pipe failure had caused a pressure drop in their main water line. 60 homes lost water completely. Another 100 had brown water trickling from taps. For 36 hours, Ridgecrest residents were boiling water or buying it by the gallon at the grocery store. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Every seat filled. Homeowners screaming. One guy stood up and yelled, "We pay $900 a month in HOA fees and we don't have drinking water." Glenn Pritchard, the skeptical board member, moved to fire Veronica as president, hire an independent engineer to assess all infrastructure, and settle with me immediately. The vote was 3-2. Veronica's rubber stamps blocked it. Glenn resigned from the board on the spot, walked straight to the Gazette office, and gave Rita an interview. This HOA is corrupt and incompetent. I can't be part of it anymore. Veronica, cornered and desperate, made her final mistake. She contacted the county attorney, the same one who'd rubber-stamped the original permit, and lobbied for an eminent domain action against my ranch. Called it a public safety issue, claimed the contaminated water and unreliable access endangered emergency services. The county attorney, who'd already received copies of the EPA complaint about Ridgecrest, told her no. Actually, according to Buck, who overheard it, he told her, "You're radioactive. Don't call me again." So she went to the original developer who'd built Ridgecrest, pitched him on buying my land, promised she'd smooth the zoning if he'd handle the acquisition. The developer, a shrewd businessman who hadn't gotten rich by making stupid bets, said, "Veronica, you've got lawsuits, EPA violations, and a rancher who clearly knows what he's doing. I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole." She was out of moves, out of allies, out of options, and I was about to make sure she knew it. Luce filed an amended complaint adding the flood damage. $26,000 in direct costs, plus punitive damages for reckless endangerment. We now had video evidence of negligent infrastructure causing quantifiable harm. The kind of evidence that makes insurance companies settle fast to avoid trial. Darnell confirmed that Ridgecrest still hadn't cured their contract violations. Day 29 of 30. Tomorrow, Clearwater would send the termination notice, and their water would be cut off within 72 hours unless they paid every penny and fixed every violation, which they couldn't do because they didn't have the money or the time. I scheduled a town hall meeting at the county courthouse, open to the public. Topic: water rights and community accountability. Sent invitations to every county commissioner, the EPA regional officer, Rita, and every other journalist in the county, and every single Ridgecrest homeowner. 200 seats in that meeting room. I expected maybe 70 people. By day of, we had a waiting list. Shauna asked me the night before what I was going to do. I smiled, told her the truth. Justice. The county courthouse meeting room was built for 200 people. By 6:30, 15 minutes before start time, there were 240 crammed inside and another 50 standing in the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The room smelled like old wood, nervous sweat, and the kind of anticipation you get before a storm breaks. Metal chairs scraped on linoleum. People whispered. Phones recorded. This wasn't just a meeting. It was an event. I sat in the back row. Baseball cap, jeans, flannel shirt, just another rancher. Veronica sat front row with Bradley Finch, her lawyer, both of them wearing expressions like they were facing a firing squad. She kept checking her phone, maybe hoping for a miracle or an escape route. Neither was coming. Buck Hollister, county commissioner, served as moderator. He opened with the basics. "We're here to address the ongoing dispute between Mr. Cole Brennan and Ridgecrest Homeowners Association. This is a public forum. Everyone will get a chance to speak." Luce went first, stood at the podium with a confidence that made the room go silent. She presented my case like a prosecutor, timeline on a projector screen, photos of the cut fence, water test results showing contamination levels, video of HOA employees dumping waste into the pipeline, financial damages itemized down to the dollar. She introduced Tommy, who explained in plain English how the undersized pipeline was doomed from the start. This wasn't an accident, this was negligence. Saving money on materials cost Mr. Brennan $38,000 in flood damage. It cost Ridgecrest residents their water for 36 hours, and it violated state and federal environmental law, the audience murmured. Several Ridgecrest homeowners looked shocked, like they'd been kept in the dark, which they had been. Luce continued. Mr. Brennan asked the HOA to do the right thing, fix the contamination, pay for damages. They responded by smearing his name, threatening his family, and sabotaging his property. We have evidence of all of it. Then Carla Jennings from the EPA stood. Stern woman, mid-50s, the kind of government employee who doesn't smile at work because work is serious. The state has opened an investigation into unpermitted discharges and illegal well drilling at Ridgecrest. Potential fines exceed $200,000. Criminal charges are being considered. Now Veronica stood, pushed past Finch's attempt to stop her, and grabbed the microphone. This is a witch hunt. Mr. Brennan has sabotaged our community from day one. He's using technicalities to extort hardworking families who just want to live in peace. A homeowner in the audience shouted, "You told us the pipeline was safe." Another voice, "My basement flooded and you haven't answered one email." Veronica tried to continue. "The HOA has limited funds and—" Glenn Pritchard, the former board member, stood up. "Limited funds? You spent $80,000 on legal fees fighting a rancher instead of fixing infrastructure that was broken from day one." The room erupted in applause. Veronica's face went red. Finch pulled her back to her seat. That's when I stood, walked to the podium. The room went dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. I looked at Veronica, then at the crowd. I want to clarify a few things. First, I never asked for a fight. I asked for fairness. I was ignored. Second, Mrs. Ashworth has claimed repeatedly that I'm powerless to stop Ridgecrest's expansion, that I should accept being steamrolled because I'm just a rancher. I paused, let it settle. She was wrong. I pulled a document from my jacket. This is the ownership registration for Clearwater Solutions, LLC, the water utility that services Ridgecrest and 13 other municipalities in this county. Another pause. I could see people leaning forward. I am the sole owner, have been for 15 years. The room exploded. Gasps. Someone shouted, "Holy shit!" Another person laughed in disbelief. Veronica's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. I kept going. Tomorrow, if Ridgecrest HOA has not cured its contract violations, Clearwater will terminate water service under Breach Remediation Clause 11C. Your homes will be legally uninhabitable until a new provider is secured. Given your EPA violations, that could take months. Property values will collapse. Phase 2 will die. Everything Veronica built will evaporate. A homeowner shouted, "You can't do that." I looked at him. I can. I don't want to. But Mrs. Ashworth has left me no choice. I turned back to Veronica. You thought I was just a rancher. You forgot ranchers survive by controlling what matters. Around here, that's water. Luce stood. However, Mr. Brennan is willing to negotiate a settlement. Terms, remove the pipeline, pay $100,000 in damages, Veronica Ashworth resigns, and the HOA agrees to a conservation easement protecting Mr. Brennan's land in perpetuity. I added one more thing. You have 12 hours. Veronica didn't say a word. She grabbed her purse and ran out of the room. Finch followed, already on his phone. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people surrounded me, angry, grateful, confused. One older man shook my hand. You played the long game, son. I nodded. I played the only game I had. Detective Ramirez approached. Mr. Brennan, we traced those intimidation texts. Warrants being issued tomorrow. I thanked him. Walked out into the night air. It smelled like rain coming. Clean rain this time. 8 a.m. the next morning, Bradley Finch called Luce, agreed to every term. Veronica resigned effective immediately, announced via a terse email to the HOA board with no explanation. Turns out Detective Ramirez's investigation had traced the witness intimidation texts to a burner phone purchased on Veronica's credit card. She was facing criminal charges, her real estate license was under review, and her 4 investment properties were being quietly listed for sale before the banks could foreclose. Sometimes karma doesn't need help, it just needs time. The new HOA board, with Glenn elected president, signed the settlement within 48 hours. The pipeline would be removed within 60 days. My land restored by a certified environmental contractor at HOA expense. $100,000 paid, funded by an emergency loan the HOA had to take at brutal interest rates. The conservation easement was recorded with the county, ensuring my 80 acres could never be developed, and Clearwater's contract was amended. I lowered their base rate as a gesture of goodwill, but added strict compliance monitoring. One more violation, and they'd be buying water from a utility 2 counties over at triple the cost. 3 weeks later, we threw a pipeline removal party at the ranch. 50 people showed up, neighbors, allies, even a few Ridgecrest residents who'd supported me from the start. We barbecued brisket that I'd been smoking since 5 a.m. Kids played in the creek, which was finally clean and flowing clear. Rufus chased frisbees until he collapsed in the shade, tongue out, happier than he'd been in months. The smell of mesquite smoke mixed with Shauna's peach cobbler cooling on the picnic table. As the sun set, fireflies emerged, blinking like little sparks of victory. Mariah pulled me aside. "Dad, I got the lease signed, opening the clinic next month." I'd given her $50,000 from the settlement to fund her veterinary practice in town. She'd been trying to secure investors for a year. Now she didn't need them. "Grandfather would be proud," she said. I smiled. "He'd say we're just taking care of our own." Buck found me by the creek, handed me a beer. "You made enemies, Cole, but you made more friends." I looked around at the people on my land, eating my food, celebrating something that felt bigger than a lawsuit. "I just wanted to be left alone." Buck laughed. "Too late for that now. You're a folk hero. Rita's article got picked up statewide. I've had 3 other counties call asking about HOA oversight reform. The real victory came 2 months later. I established the Emmett Brennan Water Stewardship Fund with $25,000 from the settlement. It provides grants to small landowners facing HOA or developer overreach, funds water quality testing for rural communities, and supports conservation efforts. The first grant went to a young family whose irrigation rights were being challenged by a golf course expansion. Luce agreed to serve as pro bono legal advisor. Tommy handles the technical consulting. We're building something that'll outlast all of us. Here's what I learned, and I want you to remember this. When powerful people try to take what's yours, you have 2 choices. Roll over or fight smarter. Fighting smarter means documentation. Every photo. Every email. Every violation. Power protects itself with lawyers and money. You protect yourself with evidence and patience. And if you're lucky enough to control something they need, whether it's water or land or information, you use that leverage without apology. Not for revenge, for justice. The Ridgecrest HOA, under new leadership, approached me last spring about partnering on a creek restoration festival, annual event. Students from Shauna's school plant native grasses. Volunteers clear invasive species. The golf course reduced pesticide use by 60% and installed a rainwater capture system. We're not friends. We'll never be friends. But we're functional, and sometimes that's enough. I'm sitting on my porch right now, watching the sun drop behind the hills. Rufus is at my feet. Shauna brings out lemonade, sits beside me. "Any regrets?" I think about it. Smile. "Just one. Should have charged them interest." She laughs. "We watch my cattle graze in pasture that's mine, protected by law, forever. Some battles you win with fists, others with patience. This one, I won with water." Now, I've got a question for you. If you've ever fought an HOA nightmare, if you've ever stood up to someone who thought they had all the power, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear how you fought back. What worked? What didn't? Because the more we share these stories, the harder it gets for bullies to win. And if you believe in standing up to petty tyrants, hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'm telling you about the neighbor who tried to steal my water rights. Didn't know I'd been recording every conversation for 6 months. You're gonna love that one.